And now onto our primary and second stone in the sacral trinity, which is a ruby. And of course, ruby is a very well-known crystal, and it is one of the crystals that features so often in ancient texts, as well as even like childhood fairy tale stories. When I was a little girl, I always wanted a ruby ring. Like, I was obsessed with the idea of rubies. And it's no wonder, because these are deeply embedded into our consciousness through even the very nature that these stones are record keepers. They're sort of imbued throughout time. So even though all crystals and all minerals are ancient old stones, because it takes so long for them to form, some of them are older than others. So the ruby is part of an ancient council of elders called the Council of Seven. And these energetics were responsible for the first seeding on our planet. So the frequency of ruby and the energy that it holds and emanates was seeded into the planet, along with 6 other crystals that created the lattice, the geometric forms of the earth itself. And from that time, as we evolved and as we grew as a species in consciousness, the earth produced more minerals to balance the movements of evolution. So, there's a natural evolutionary growth that happens, and I can talk more about that now. Nowadays, we're getting so many interesting souls from all across the galaxy coming into the planet. So in that way, our earth is producing more minerals, it's producing more plants, it's producing energetic matches for the new seeds of consciousness, the star seeds that are coming in. But ruby is an ancient one, and it is through ruby actually that this whole body of information that I've been studying for over 10 years now, the liquid crystals, has been rebirthed. It actually, working with the liquid crystals is an ancient Palladian liquid light technology, and it was very much used in Atlantean times, and probably beforehand actually, because it came from off planet. So the ruby itself holds the memory of these times, specifically of Atlantean lifetimes. So often these crystals, they form in lots of different ways, and I'll speak a little bit more about the structure that is in your notes, but you'll see there's a picture there of a ruby record keeper, and a ruby record keeper is a raw piece of ruby that has triangular sort of structures that are lifted out, and sometimes they're indented in the face of the crystals. So this indicates that when you have this perfected triangular shape, it sort of like locks information in. It's a storehouse. And for those that know how to access this information, it's essentially accessing the Akashic records, accessing all the records of our history. So I would love to tell you a story about this, but I'd like to just get through a little bit more about just the shape of the crystals, because you'll be looking at these pictures and go, a lot of people think, ruby, we might only see them in jewelry form, shiny red, blood red kind of cabochons or cut crystals. And they do form in so many different ways, but naturally they have a hexagonal lattice, so kind of like a beehive. So when you see these crystals growing, they can show this hexagonal shape. And it's interesting because along with all of its energies of vitality and of fertility and all of the sacral energies that it holds, ruby is also a stone of the heart. So this is a master tantric stone that helps to bring the kundalini energy up through the heart. So we're transcending that primal sexual desire that crocite activates in us. So it's like we awaken this fire. But ruby is the crystal that filters this energy, builds this energy into a place of mastery where we direct it through the heart. So all of these creative, vital, life force energy is filtered through the field of love, because essentially ruby speaks the languages of love in all of its forms. So it's one of the most profound crystals to healing broken hearts, but also any trauma and wounding held in the womb space. We store a lot of trauma here, male and female, in the whole pelvic region. It's sort of in our hips, in our wombs, in our haras. This area is like a reservoir of stored emotion. And in the notes, I've put some more information about delving a little deeper into how our body can store emotion, and how in different systems like Chinese medicine systems, they have specific areas that they believe store specific emotions. For example, grief and sadness in the lungs, anger in the liver, etc., etc. But ultimately, in a lot of somatic body work and healing, they really focus on the sacral area as being the storehouse of unprocessed emotions. And this is what also connects it in with the unconscious. So our body represents our unconscious field as well. You know, when we have things, challenges come up in life that have an emotional response or a traumatic response, you know, it's natural in the animal kingdom, at least. Let's say a gazelle being chased by a alligator. It's running and it's doing all it can. It has the adrenaline rush to just get out of there. But once it stops, let's say it didn't get eaten, once it stops and its heart rate returns down to normal, often these animals will shake and quiver. So it's the shaking and the quivering that help release this stored emotion. So for us, when we go through highly charged experiences or traumatic experience, sometimes we will shake. We will notice we shake. And even when we're making love, we shake, we quiver. It's like a way that we ripple this energy through our body, and to shake off any stored energy, whether it be adrenaline or different hormones, different emotions, we shake them off so they don't get stored in the body and ultimately compact there and cause disease processes. So ruby is a master healer for all sacral and heart related issues. And going back to its shape, the hexagonal structure, you know, if you were to draw lines from each of the corners of the hexagon, you've got two triangles either side. So you've got a star tetrahedron, which is the shape of the heart chakra. Draw lines around it and it's a hexagon. So it's quite beautiful. I love it how minerals actually show us in the way that they grow, how they work in the body. So yeah, I really love this sacral heart connection. So this is the one that's going to go deep with you. It's going to be doing the deep healing by uncovering things that are stored, and giving you the resilience and the courage. So again, connecting in with the courage of the heart. And, you know, I said this is a stone of the courageous heart, but it's sometimes also referred to the stone of the spiritual warrior, because it holds a lot of spiritual power and spiritual vitality to be able to tackle any challenge and find positive outcomes to move through and step forward beyond trauma, beyond wounding. So yeah, it's definitely one of those crystals that packs a lot of punch, and it will definitely get things moving. It's not a stone that allows you to stay in your own spiral. Often when we have a lot of stored unprocessed trauma, and I think we can all say, you know, life brings that, and when we're children, we don't have the tools to know how to deal with it sometimes. And society tells us it's not appropriate to be angry, it's not appropriate to cry. You know, especially that thing, you know, boys don't cry. So like a lot of men have so much stored, emotion stored, because they're told they weren't allowed to cry. You know, like crying is our body's way of processing. Shaking, dancing, moving is our way of processing. But when we're children and when we're young adults even, we don't always know how to do this. And then we set a pattern of shoving it down and processing it down, or perhaps eating foods just to make ourselves feel better, or smoking a cigarette, or reaching for some alcohol. All these kind of addictive things are ways of not feeling our body. So this month, we're working with our physical feeling body. This is like the reservoir of emotion. And that's why the sacral chakra is sometimes represented as a crescent moon. It's like a bowl, like a container that contains water, or like the womb has, you know, like these the waters that are very much connected with the oceans. So I'll speak more about the waters and about working with the beach and with energies in the ocean for the next crystal. But essentially, this is emotional therapy. We're working with our feeling bodies. So you might feel that as these things are being stirred up, you might want to ask for support or get some support that's beyond just your regular talk therapy. Somatic body work is the best thing we can do. And whether that's hypnotherapy, whether that's dancing, whether it's shaking therapy, I don't know if you've heard of that. I'll see if I can find some YouTube links to show these processes where you can actually help your whole pelvic region to shake. There's some processes called tantric dance, which help to really move the pelvis from front to back, side to side, figure of eights and circles. And all of this helps to not only tone the reproductive organs and the muscles in the area, but it's also moving and shaking up stagnant energy that's stuck there. When we think about cultures like India or Africa, where the women, you know, hold the pots on their head and they're able to keep the top half of their body just incredibly still to hold these incredibly heavy weights. And these are tiny little women. I've seen them in India and gone, wow, how do they do that? But they move completely from their base like a pendulum. Their hips are swinging. And when we walk with swinging hips and moving all the blood around our pelvis, it's keeping a lot of vitality and health and flushing that whole area. So those kind of movements are very supportive as well. Okay, so I want to go back to what I was mentioning before, which is a story I love to share from the founder of Liquid Crystals, who has written the Liquid Crystal Oracle. So if you haven't seen this book by Justin Mojica Assar, there's a lot of beautiful information in that book, but his story is quite profound, and his story came through, or all of this teaching, all of this information, all of these memories of Atlantean lifetimes came through a ruby record keeper. So when he was a young boy, I think, or even when he was born, his mother and father were given a scroll saying what the purpose of his life would be, or what was destined for his life. This almost sounds like a story, like an ancient story that you'd watch in a fairy tale, but it's quite remarkable, considering his parents, I think, were quite deep in their own pathways of spirituality. I think his mum was very connected to the Indian yogic teachings, and his dad was very much connected to the more pagan druidic teachers and lineages of natural-based healing. So he grew up with these formidable parents, but his parents were told when he was born, your child is here for a specific reason, and when he's 7 years old, you must take him to this monastery in Tibet and leave him there for a while to get training and teachings from the monks there. So can you imagine just dropping your kid off to Tibet? But that's what they did. They took their child up to this monastery, and left him there. And he didn't go into much about what happened there or what he was taught. But by the time he was ready to come home, the monks gave him this ruby record keeper crystal and said that this was his in another life, in his previous life in Atlantis, and that all of his memories would be in this crystal. So at 7 years old, I think he probably was like, well, that sounds cool, but who knows whether he could access them at that point. Essentially, it's taken him his whole life of kind of rejecting spirituality, rejecting the path that his parents put him on. Because ultimately, you know, when you're told to do something as a kid, you're going to do the opposite, right? So he rejected this path initially, and he just started taking up surfing. He ended up being a pro surfer and traveled all around the world, just collecting sand from around the beaches without even knowing that his journey of collecting sands from beaches all around the world was actually a unification that was happening for the next crystal we're going to be talking about, zircon. So he was unifying all of these energies from around the planet. And at some point he came to the realization that through this crystal, all these memories came back about how we worked with crystals, what their function was, how through great cataclysmic disaster that the unifying principle of these crystalline frequencies had been scattered across the planet. And so his job for his whole life was to unify these frequencies. And he brought it into a unified field of 77 master crystals, which became the liquid crystals. And there's so much more to the story I would love to share, but I'm aware that it's going to be very hard to upload a long video. So yeah, that was the birthplace of the liquid crystals. And the funny thing was, when he was well into his 40s and after he birthed this information, he thought, that's it, I've done my job, my life path, I'm going to take this ruby back to Tibet, give it back to the monks, I'm done. So he went all the way to Tibet, to this monastery, gave the crystal back, and it was at 2012. So he was told he had until 2012 to complete his mission, which he did. He got home back to Torquay, Australia at the time, to find that the ruby had rematerialized and appeared in his sock drawer, but this time it was in a locket. It was in something that he could wear. This time the other side, the other face of the crystal was opened, and all these little triangles, all these records were on the other side of the crystal. So then he realized that that first 40 years of his life, or however long that was, maybe 40, 50 years, were just one side of the information that he was to bring back to the planet, to humanity at this time. And then there was a whole nother chapter. So it was almost like a test. Could he do it? And then really he's only just beginning. So from that time, he then brought out another 33 crystals that are specifically connected with the star children and the new frequencies that have been arriving on the planet after the 2012. We all know that end of the Mayan calendar was a bit of perhaps a miscalculation, but actually it was probably taken more literal, like that it was going to be a cataclysmic end of the world event. But actually the earth is changing. And there's, again, a lot I could speak about this. It's so fascinating to me. But essentially at that time, a lot of ancient energy has been moved and shifted all the way. Everything that was in the earth has arisen, and that which is in the cosmos has been anchored back into the earth. That's why the calling in of all these galactic star nations back into the planet at this time, which means the planet is actually holding a similar frequency to what it was back in Atlantean times. So that's why, you know, it's like his work was preparing us to be able to receive the information of all these changes that are really coming to pass now in 2025. We've just moved through this equinox period where that transition that started back in 2012 has actually come to almost like a shift, and we've just been navigating these big changes in the world and in our bodies. That's why it's so important that we are resetting, recalibrating all of our body systems. So I'm going to leave it there for the ruby. There is so much to speak to in the presence of the ruby, but I'm going to move on to the next one, and we'll see you soon.